Welcome to a very special edition of the Three Down Nation podcast. I'm JC Abbott, joined by Devynn Cromwell, defensive back from Michigan State, here at the CFL Combine. I want to start with your recent pro day at Michigan State. You put up some freaky numbers in the vertical and in the broad, but you weren't able to finish it out due to an injury. What was the nature of that injury, and how are you feeling right now?
Yeah. So unfortunately, on my one of my jumps, I came down kind of weird on it, and at first I wasn't too sure what that was, but after I finished out, did my bench and my broad jump, I the consensus was I tore my meniscus. So I found that out the following day, and it's super unfortunate, not the best timing with that, but I do have a surgery date on Monday. So right when I fly back, I get surgery essentially. So I kind of find out also when my how long the recovery is gonna look once I wake up out of surgery because they could either repair my meniscus or potentially just kind of clean it up and go in there kind of just fix a little bit of my meniscus. So gotta kind of go and see how it goes from there.
So what's the low end of the recovery time and what's the high end?
Yeah, so low end, if they just go in and clean it up, is looking at maybe 2 months. High end, around 5 months, on that.
Wow. Teams were certainly hoping that you would finish
Yep.
that pro day because of what you are capable of doing
Mhm.
athletically. You didn't get a chance to show it in the 40, but maybe you could give us a preview here. What do you think you could have been able to run if you had been healthy?
Yeah, of course, I was super excited coming into that as well. I knew I was gonna test well, and, with especially with my track background and just my athletic ability in general, 40 was next, and I was super excited to go drop close in the 4 threes. I was thinking even high 4 twos, to be quite honest there. Um, and just because of the training and what the numbers were looking like through training and, I was super excited to do that, and so it was really unfortunate, not being able to finish out, and even just the agility drills and stuff like that. I really excited to go perform and show off my explosiveness as well.
Is this the first time you've dealt with injury in your career?
No, I've had a shoulder labrum
Mhm.
situation. So at Texas Tech, just past middle of the season, I came down on a tackle and tore my meniscus and had a little fracture in
Mm.
my shoulder as well. So I had shoulder lattice surgery. That healed up pretty well, and I was good to go after spring ball.
At what age did you realize that not only are you a good athlete, you're a special athlete?
Yeah, honestly, so I started I was in sports all my life, and when I was maybe 11, around that age, I was taking Brazilian jiu-jitsu pretty seriously, actually.
Mm.
And I was always that kid that would go home and hop on YouTube and, try to learn as much as possible because I want to go into next practice or next class and just just know more than all my friends and all the other guys out there. So, I think, early on, my friends and family and my coaches even realized that well, they had to bump me up to like older age groups and,
Mm.
I'd be training with the adults when I'm 11 years old, so from an early age, they kind of knew that there's something different on the athletic side of things. And I kind of just carried that on into all the other sports really and then ultimately into football. So
Having those special traits, uh, why weren't you noticed sooner? Why did you end up having to go to Guelph before the NCAA came
yeah,
calling?
of course, it's actually a crazy story. So um I started football in grade 11.
Mm.
Um grade 12, I started to show more signs of because I just started to understand the game
Mm.
really. And grade 12, I started to kind of break out a bit more and show my athleticism. And then I went to the Nike opening. They had these combines where it's basically a combine down in the States where you show your athletic ability. And I went and ran a 4.4 in grade 11 in front of a bunch of NCAA scouts, and that's when they were all hitting me up, and so I kind of had that attention early on. But unfortunately, because I took I didn't know how the courses worked and all that stuff to be NCAA legible. The courses I took in grade 9 kind of crept back up on me because I took applied courses.
Mm.
So, a decision I made way back in grade 9 slowly crept up and bit me in the back when I was trying to go pursue my dreams ultimately. So, I was there, all these coaches, Notre Dame, all these coaches were sending me, like, hey, like, let me get your transcript. I sent them the transcript, like, hey, like, you're actually missing these core courses. So I'm like, damn, like, that kind of crushed me. And I knew I had to take the longer route and, went to Guelph and still pursued trying to go to NCAA, but it just kind of looked a bit different in that
Mm.
sense.
You play 3 seasons at Guelph. You're all Canadian in your first season. You're an all-star multiple times. You have a ton of success there. Um, what was the decision like to leave? Because I'm sure you had a great deal of attachment
Yeah.
to the Griffins.
Yeah, as much as I loved being at Guelph and, my friends, it's close to home and just the program and being around those coaches and everything, I was always craving that, just something more.
Mhm.
I wanted to put myself into uncomfortable situations. I'm always kind of seeking an uncomfortable situation where I can grow and be a better player at the end of the day. So I think that's what's the most important thing to me and what I prioritize. So it was hard in the sense that I'm pushing all these people and all of the just like my past behind, but I know it's for a better reason. So at the end of the day, wasn't the hardest decision because I knew that's what I wanted and what I've been looking for. So it did make that decision a lot easier.
At that time, how many offers did you have on the table, to choose from
Yeah.
before you opted to go to Texas Tech?
I believe I had around 7, 8 offers. I did end up committing a bit early. Once my family went down and we took that visit, they were pretty set on wanting to go to tech, and I liked it as well. So we didn't want to sit in that portal for too long because spots were getting taken up, and as a Canadian, especially, you don't have too much time. So
How much of an inspiration was a guy like Tavius Robinson in that, process? Also attending Guelph,
yeah.
transferring down to Ole Miss, and having the success he had, eventually becoming an NFL draft pick.
Yeah, of course. Tavius, honestly, he's helped me along this entire journey. I've hit him up with questions and he's always, just so he's just always trying to help. So, I appreciate that a lot. And, you know, having someone kind of there to guide you along during the process, it helps so much because, well, one, the second I got to Guelph and, I had my first season, he was hitting me up like, "Hey, like, Ole Miss was like the coach at Ole Miss was talking about you, this, that." So that also kept my hopes alive,
Mm.
which was super important because had I not been like, "Okay, I got some attention," I'd be like, "Okay, maybe I'm not good enough." So having that and, like, him being like, "You could do this," helped me in the long run, and just having that guidance and that mentorship at the end of the day, was really impactful.
What was the hardest part of adjusting from U Sports football to, Power 5
Mhm.
football in the NCAA?
I'd say the hardest part would maybe be just getting used to everything. I say that because, you go from a school where you have to have a job, you don't have too many resources. Um, and that's not because of the school, that's just because of the funding in Canada, really. That's just how it is. And going from that to, you get all this stuff and provided for you. So just being like, well, like it's almost like a shock. It's like,
Mm.
whoa, like now it's just the shift of having all these things on your plate to, now I could just focus on football. But it just looks a bit different and feels different. So that'd be just I guess the biggest thing. The hardest thing could be just I'd say maybe like either the culture or just yeah, getting used to the culture. Going from Guelph and 2,000 people in the stands is probably the most you're getting on like a
Mhm.
homecoming, 2,000, 3,000, and having to go to a stadium where you're selling out 70, 80,000 people every single week. It's like you got to kind of push that aside and just focus on yourself and focus on ball and not kind of cave into the all the DMs you get when you miss a tackle or all the hate or whatever it may be. So
You spend that first year with the Red Raiders, and then you elect to transfer again, this time to Michigan State. What
mm,
went into that decision?
yeah, of course. So what was a big decision with that was, you know, just over halfway through the season at Texas Tech, I got hurt and got surgery. So I missed most of spring ball. And I thought I had no more eligibility. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go to CFL but I also would have not been able to, well, it's kind of funny looking at it because I'm not doing much right now, but I knew my shoulder would be messed up and I wouldn't be able to kind of showcase my skills. I wouldn't have been able to do a pro day. I wouldn't have been able to do a lot of things. So I was in a kind of a tough situation, just even mentally, and trying to figure out what's next. But then, luckily, I found out that I could get another job, not another job, another year. So I got granted that through, I guess, this lawsuit that was going on with the whole JUCO NCAA settlement and all that stuff. So I found out I got another year, and I was like, okay, let me weigh my options. Am I gonna go to the CFL right now and know I can't showcase any of my skills and I'm going to probably still be hurt coming into the season or camp, or I could go back to the NCAA, recover in the best facilities and figure out myself, buy myself more time. So, I hit the portal and, I was trying to see what schools were best fit. And ultimately, I found that Michigan State was the best situation for me.
What have you learned from your time south of the border playing big time college football?
Yeah, I've learned a lot. You're around such intelligent, coaches, players, and just seeing how they run things down there and what success looks like and how a successful team is run and just how big programs are run. So, one thing I've definitely learned is that, you have to be players first and you have to care about the players along with just everybody has to buy in. You can't have a team where everyone's selfish and it's hard, especially with all the money going on in the NCAA. So, you could see some selfishness creeping in. But if you want to succeed as a team, you have to be bought in and you have to buy into the program and the bigger picture rather than just yourself and the money ultimately.
The athletic numbers speak for themselves, but you haven't always been a full time player or full time starter at that level. I'm sure you're going to get asked by teams that question this week, like why didn't you see the field more with all the skills that you do possess?
Mhm.
How do you respond to that question?
Yeah, of course, I'm that type of person that I'm going to always put myself once again into challenging situations. That it's not going to be easy and it's not going to be just just a straight route, to success. But I know that, when I go into these situations, I'm going to try my best and I'm going to accept and do the best at whatever role that's given to me at the end of the day. So, whether that's Michigan State or Texas Tech, I played games, didn't start all the way through at Texas or didn't play as many games or didn't have the role that I would have wanted. But at the end of the day, it's not always up to me. And I'm going to do what's best for the team. I'm gonna do what's best for the players, and I just have to, I go in knowing that I'm gonna accept my role, but I'm always gonna give 100%, and I'm gonna strive to be better every single day. So whatever my role is, I will do my best at that role, and in the midst of trying to get bigger roles, I'm going to keep working, keep learning, and try to be the best player I am.
You've shown some versatility throughout your career in terms of the different positions that you've lined up at. Where do you think your best fit is at the CFL level?
Yeah, I'm gonna be completely honest. I'm confident that I could play any position in the secondary. I've done it all, whether that was at Guelph or even at the NCAA level. And being able to go from corner to safety, back to corner to halfback, and whatever that may be, it looks different. And I'm confident in my ability and, you know, I like being able to move around because you learn so much at each position. So I'm truly confident that wherever the team needs be and team sees that I perform the best or fit the best into their system that I'll be there and I'll give them the best I could do.
Last thing I'll ask you, with all your unique ability, what is your ceiling in the CFL?
In what terms?
Uh, how high can you go? Like, is there a benchmark that you have in terms of what you want to achieve in your
Yeah.
career or what you think you're capable of?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I feel like I never put a cap on my ceiling. I'm gonna shoot for the stars every single time. You know what I mean? And wherever I land up or whatever happens after that, uh, that's ultimately what's gonna happen. But at the end of the day, I'm gonna shoot to be the best. And I know that whatever I put my mind to, I can achieve. And that's kind of my mindset and how I approach life at the end of the day. So
Well, this has been an absolute pleasure, Devin. We certainly wish that we were seeing you on the field this weekend,
me
but
too.
we wish you the best of luck in
Thank you.
interviews and in the CFL draft in the month
Appreciate
to
it.
come.
Thank
Have a
you.
good one.